Okay, so we have talked about ambient light. Now we need to go a little further. It's critical to really see how light embraces the world around us, how it caresses subjects, or how it can ruin everything, and I mean everything. The first step in taking a photograph is figuring out the relationship between the subject and the lighting. It sounds obvious, but there's a little bit more to it than you might think. You can make adjustments to your camera that will compensate for or enhance the natural light you've got around you. But you can also make adjustments to your position, and thus the camera's position, in relation to both the light and the subject. I've talked about harsh light and soft light and told you to try to avoid the former and embrace the latter. In this lecture, I'm going to talk more about light quality, including color. Now, by color, I mean two different things. The color of different types of light. All light is not created equal. It's not the same. I'll explain that in a minute. And also, color means the colors in your pictures, like this, right? The colors in your pictures. What are people wearing? What colors are things throwing off towards you? How about the objects in the background? We really want to think about that. We really do. We never really think about light though, do we? Not really. We don't think about great light, and that's what I want you guys to be thinking about from now on. I'm telling you though, it's going to ruin how you watch movies even, because you're going to notice changes in light. You're going to get good at seeing really good light, and when that light doesn't work just quite right. So what exactly is great light? Let's take a look. What's great light? Great light is when the sun is low on the horizon or on an overcast day. Sure, overcast light. Could be introduced light like flash. That can be great light. Can also come from something as simple as a single reading lamp. Just a reading lamp. Just one tungsten bulb with a shade on it. That's all it is. Great light can come from anywhere, but you have to be aware of it and look for it. Great light could be in a couple of little light wands practicing around in the living room. Could be anything. So let's get started. The color of light, very important. Let's talk about seeing the color of light. That may be a new experience for many of us. We don't think about the color of light very often. Why? Because our eyes and our brains adjust for it automatically. Automatically. Check this out. Look at how blue this is. Well, that's late on an overcast day. And it was snowy, blue, very, very blue. But your eye doesn't see that. Your eye sees it as white. Your camera picks up the blue, though. Or how about this? Really, really red late in the day, that red light bouncing off the clouds, throwing red light all over everything. Why is it that our brains don't see this? Why is it our eyes don't see this? Well, mainly because our brains evolved thinking all light should be white, just like the sun. The sun is the ultimate white light source. So today when our eyes and brains come across a colored light source, it just adjusts the light as much as it can. Now you don't see that really when you're walking around and you're looking at a sunset. Of course it appears red to you. That's pretty obvious. It's easy to see that color. But sometimes our cameras show us where our eyes and our brains are fooled. Don't think so? I'll prove it. Check this out. You've been driving around after sunset. You see the lights coming up in houses around town. Sure, a little twilight in the sky left. See the yellow lights coming on in houses? Well, why is it if you were to walk up and into that home and see a newspaper, for example, that newspaper would be snow white? Why is that? Why is it? My brother with a school bus mask on for some reason while he reads. Anyway, your brain corrects that yellow light back to white immediately because our brains did not evolve with anything but fire, and that was very late in the process. So all light, if it's even marginal, gets corrected back to white by our brains. Your camera's going to get the true colors though, and that's a good thing. I love the fact that we get extra color and variety out of things with our cameras. That is fantastic. Love it. The colors of light perceived by your camera are things that we usually can't, not unless it's really obvious like a sunset, like I said. They're very warm and very cool light sources, man-made. So let's talk about cool light first, all right? Sometimes it's not even man-made. Overcast day, a blue subject, for example, the whole thing is cool. This is in Antarctica on an overcast day. The predominant light source in these clouds is going to be kind of a bluish gray. The iceberg itself is very dense, and that means the blue is the only color that can be refracted out. Blue refracts out the easiest. So we have a shaded subject here, and it's blue. It's just all about blue. Blue is relaxing and serene and calming. Blue light sources are something I think about all the time, and I think they're lovely. Very legitimate, very legitimate. Let's look at a couple other light sources, though. and just talk about what's going on here. Here I am holding hands with my wife. We're sitting on our back porch. It's late in the evening. We're in the shade. What does blue do to this? Well, it makes us think we're relaxed. It could be we're talking about something deep, philosophical. We're not talking about photography, I guarantee you that. But it's contemplative light. It's just a light that makes you want to slow down, relax, and think. What else can blue be? Blue can be kind of creepy, kind of eerie. Daughter Ellen at a computer there. If an adolescent girl is on a computer and she's bathed in a creepy blue light, what are you thinking? What's she looking at? What's she gotten herself into? Blue can imply lots of things then. Mood, slow motion, thoughtfulness, tranquility, or eeriness. Let's talk about reddish light a bit. Reddish light. Wow, kind of like this. This is from a rattlesnake hunt in Oklahoma, believe it or not, a rattlesnake derby in Mangum, Oklahoma. Now check this out. This is a place where all the snakes are brought into a tent, a big rattlesnake pit. These guys are with the Short Grass Rattlesnake Association, and they actually wander around the pits with these snakes and they don't get bitten. They wear long boots under their jeans to prevent that. They explain why snakes are important in the ecosystem, which is great, how snakes eat mice and rats and insects. But the thing I loved about this visually is that the ceiling of the tent was translucent and red, and it's in the middle of the day when the light is just burning harsh outside. The light outside this tent is awful, but inside it's really red, and that's great. Why? Because red implies danger. You got all these western diamondback rattlesnakes in a pit, and there's guys walking around. That's dangerous. Dangerous light for a dangerous subject. How perfect is that? I love it. Some people would see the light and immediately want to get their flash out to clean it all up to white or to make it brighter. No, 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 no. Do not do that. The color of light is really important to find all of its infinite varieties. This is the good stuff. And this is what I'm looking for, man. This is what I'm looking for. By the way, look at this background right there. You would not be able to read that snake's head unless it was right against that white box. I'm thinking about all this stuff all the time. Not just quality of light, but backgrounds and apertures, depth of field, shutter speeds, the whole thing. But man, with a nice background, you can really make something pop in a chaotic situation. Okay, back to light, back to light. What else? What does reddish light say, really, about this photograph? It's bright, late in the day, it's warm and natural. Sometimes red light can be romantic, which is also kind of soothing. It can fuel the heart. Sometimes it can be exciting. Sometimes it implies danger, as I said. Sometimes it's none of those. Sometimes it's just a beautiful, lovely light source for the scene and just a beautiful color palette, and that's good enough, okay? What else? Yellowish light. Picture a hailstorm coming in at sunset near Hayesville, Kansas. The light's actually got a greenish yellow cast, very ominous. This is that hue that you get when a really violent storm comes through. Hailstorms absolutely devastate crops out here in the heartland where I live. This is something that happens every summer, every summer. When I shot this almost 20 years ago, I didn't realize there was something outstanding or unique about it. I hadn't been thinking about light that long, but after all these years, the picture still holds up in a way because the color of the light is so unusual and weird. So, the bottom line is this. If your light is warm or cool, if it has color in it, your picture will have one more element, one more point of interest. This alone can save your picture. So, there's the color of found ambient light. Okay, reflected light. Let's talk about reflected light a little bit. The color that reflects off other objects around your subject. Let's look at this picture of my little boy Spencer. He's right in there nuzzling up to a red coat in my wife's closet. There's a little bit of indirect bright light coming in from a window that's out of the frame. Notice the red cast right there, kicking off that red coat and light in his face. Is subtle, but you can see it. A little bit of shift of the light. It picks up the color of the things it's bouncing off of. Beyond introducing a little bit of color though, that light source is really, it's pretty soft. There's not harsh shadows there, and it picks up color. I love that. Reflected light is such a good thing. It's really great. And dare I say, one of my favorite light sources. Better than throwing flash in on something even. People want to get out that flash, but man, you do not have to. You don't, okay? All right, how about this next one? Blue light. Well, there's more than that going on here. Look at this. She's wearing one of those sparkle cowgirl shirts, one of those rodeo queen shirts, and it's kicking reflected blue streaks up onto her face from all those sequins. It's adorning her face, just like reflections off a crown. So it doesn't need to be yellow light from a tungsten bulb. It doesn't need to be a translucent red tint at a snake festival. It can simply be an article of clothing that's shiny or reflective. It can be anything. It can be anything. Let's talk about white balance a little bit. Now, if we want to control color again, there's more we can do. There's a shortcut. There's actually a shortcut. There's settings on your cameras, most cameras, that balance different hues out and makes the light simply correct back to white. We call this white balance. Let me pick up the camera, show you what I mean here. White balance settings on this camera, pretty easy to use, pretty easy. Basically, it says WB. Your camera's going to be different now. You never know. And I can literally switch the different ways that this camera interprets the color of light. Pretty easy. Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, yeah, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Let's take a look at another picture. This is a scene of some friends of mine, a friend of mine that was getting married and her sisters helping her out, backstage on the wedding day at the Lincoln Country Club. And I've given it different color treatments here to show you what we're talking about. Now, we could show this as the camera saw it, all tungsten, very, very yellow. Now, this is on the daylight setting of my camera, which is going to read the light color in the room, the yellow tungsten light, for exactly what it is, yellow. Now, I like warm colors and I like it in my work. Nothing wrong with this. But with that white balance on the camera, look at what you can do. Isn't that cool? Okay, this is correcting all the light back to white. This is the tungsten setting. The tungsten setting in your white balance, just like old tungsten film, adds a blue layer. It just adds a blue layer and it corrects that yellow out. So look at how we've corrected that up to white. Fine, that's fine. Or how about another setting? You go halfway, split the difference. Wow, not as yellow, not as white. It's kind of nice. This is called your auto white balance setting, which kind of balances things out. No problem there. That might be a good solution. Leave your camera on an auto, okay? Personally, I really like it yellow. I like it as the camera originally saw it. I leave my camera set on daylight all the time because I want different colors. I think that's more attractive in a way. It looks like a painting. It looks very romantic. It almost looks like firelight. Again, this is using the daylight setting, which I use all the time in order to get the real colors that are out there, not some cleaned up version of the world. Your white balance really changes the mood of the picture, doesn't it? Totally does. You know, the filament in incandescent bulbs is made from tungsten, which throws off a very yellow light, obviously. It's evident in those bridal shots. If I'd shot that same scene with my camera set to tungsten the whole time, which corrects for yellowness, it would look like like it's all cleaned up. The white balance correction shifted that color temperature, literally. It shifted the yellow end of the spectrum towards blue for a neutral result. But again, do I want that all the time? No, not really. Not really. I don't want to clean the whole world up to white like an operating room. I'm not interested in that. I want variety. I really do. Your camera has a lot of white balance settings on it. So let's talk about that for a minute. On my camera, A is for automatic. It cleans everything up to white. I don't use that one very often. Maybe I would if a room was very green with fluorescent light, but then again, I'd probably just use, that's right, wait for it, the fluorescent setting on white balance. And even then, I'd sometimes clean it up because I don't want green, but maybe not. I don't know, it just depends on my mood. Remember, you have to look at each situation and think about it, look at it, think, what do I want to do with this scene? There are no hard rules. It's just a matter of shooting, chimping, or looking at the back and making adjustments, shooting again. That's the beauty of digital. You can just look at the back of the camera and you can figure it out. So let's look at the same scene using different white balance settings on your camera. Let's start looking at scenes and thinking about that with man-made light, artificial light. Start trying to do that. Fiddle around with the dials and see what effects you like. Let's start here with the sunny or daylight setting, which is the one that I use most often. It's a natural setting for sunlight. Images shot on the daylight setting look a lot like the images off my old Velvia transparency film or slide film, warm and relatively saturated. I leave my camera on that one a lot because it looks right to me. Blue looks blue, yellow looks yellow. In general, I like the different colors that daylight settings give me. I really do. Everything's pretty much as it should be. Let's look at this. Let's look at this setting here. Daylight setting. That's just as it should be. Kathy at home with the dogs in the living room. Okay, so great. There's a white light source. It's the sun reflected in my living room, and my camera is set to daylight. All right? Tungsten setting is next. Kathy was patient enough to stand there for me while I ran the settings. Tungsten, look at that. We're introducing that blue layer, much cooler, much cooler. Basically gives everything that blue cast to combat any yellow, that any yellow, doesn't have to be tungsten bulb coming in there, any yellow is negated by that blue. You can use this to shoot indoors if you want to combat that or not. If you like the yellow effect, don't, okay? Let's look at another one. Fluorescent. There's a fluorescent setting, as I mentioned, which adds a layer of magenta tint to get all that green out from fluorescent bulbs that we run into. In a daylight scene like this, you can see that layer of magenta, can't you? In terms of color temperature, for me, it's between daylight and tungsten, right? You could use that in a workshop or wherever you find fluorescent lighting on your subject. Easy enough to remember, easy enough. Okay, what's this setting? This is one we haven't talked about yet, cloudy day setting. This is an interesting one. I use this once in a while. A cloudy day is a very gray day, right? Well, a cloudy day setting in white balance, at least on my camera and many of yours, is basically a setting that warms up the scene a little bit. It uses a white balance that's a bit more than the daylight setting in terms of warmth. Pictures are going to be warmer rather than cooler with a cloudy day setting. If it's a cloudy day setting, I could put it on there and it would just warm up the world just a little bit, okay? And finally, what do we have here? This is your auto white balance. The auto white balance that looks so good of those girls in that really yellow room, I don't care for it here that much. It's a little bit bluish. And I don't use that auto white setting too much, as I mentioned, because it makes things just a little boring. Tell you the truth, just a little boring. I want variety. That's why I'm in photography. I love it. So I play with these settings from time to time, but usually I keep it simple. I leave it on the sunny setting mostly when I'm shooting. I really like to be surprised, don't you? I like these happy accidents we get. Now remember, use all this color in the light and that you find on the street and in your home or at the mall or wherever you are, and use it to your advantage. Good photographers pay attention to these differences. Sometimes you might use a white balance setting, but sometimes you won't. Sometimes you might be daylight, sometimes you might be tungsten. Don't feel that you have to correct the light to white with the white balance all the time. Sometimes, most of the time, I don't correct anything. I leave it on daylight and I go. So again, try to get the picture right, by the way, when you're shooting it. Here's something to think about. When I'm out shooting, I want the picture to be right the first time. I try to fix things in the viewfinder as I'm shooting. If a picture is too far away, I walk up closer to it. If a picture is too yellow for my taste, I would fix it with my white balance or with a flash, or I would move the subject over closer to a window. It saves me a lot of time afterwards, and I do mean a lot. Think about that. Don't tell yourself, oh, I'll fix it later in the computer. Get it right in the camera. Don't you spend enough time in front of the computer already? Good grief. Whatever you do with the computer later will be stuff you want to do or choose to do, rather than stuff you have to do in order to save yourself and get decent pictures. So, the color of light is one area where the way your camera sees is different from the way your brain and your eyes see. We've established that. Light intensity is another area where your eyes and your camera are going to be seeing things differently. Why is that? Intensity, by the way, is the term that covers hard light versus soft light. When the light is harsh, it is intense. When it is an indirect, soft, diffused, reflected, it is less intense. So why is that? It's the dynamic range. Dynamic range. Your eye has a tremendous ability to forgive harsh, contrasty situations. We call this exposure latitude. Okay? The difference between the brightest bright and the darkest dark in a scene you're looking at is called the dynamic range. When the light is really harsh, your eye can see into the shadows just as at the same time it's seeing into highlights. Human eyes can handle a world of dramatic range and retain details in both the highlights and dark. That's why you can be sitting in your house, looking out the window on a sunny day, read the paper, and look outside with the dog chasing a cat. Not so with film. Not so. Digital sensors or film cameras, it's too hard for them. They can't get a great dynamic range. That's where you have to come in. That's where you have to help it along. You really do. Let's take a look at a couple images. Look at this. We're going to talk about a real bright situation. This is in the Galapagos Island. Marine iguanas, very cool animals. This is a very bright situation, and you can still see some detail, I guess, kind of. But you can't really, your camera can't really deal with the dark shadows and the highlights at the same time. It can't. It just can't deal with them. When I was there, I could see into the shadows and the highlights, but It's really important for me to check my camera screen and my histogram because my camera is seeing the intensity of light differently than my eyes are. Now look at this, maybe a little better. Look at that, we can even see that there's color. There's a little bit of red and green in these animals. In softer light, maybe earlier or later in the day, the light between the shadows and the highlights is less. They match up. You're lowering the difference. They come together. The camera can handle that exposure difference, that dynamic range, but only if you help it out. You really have to work at the right time of day. You have to work at the right time of day to have a soft subject or have it shaded or help it out with flash. You just can't handle that high dynamic range like our eyes can. That's really key in thinking about why your pictures work and why they don't. If everything's soft and evenly lit like we are here, you can see every detail. It just makes shooting easy. That's why I love waiting for the sun to go down. Nice, beautiful glow all over everything. Light intensity and dynamic range are areas, in addition to color, where you as a photographer need to be aware of how the camera sees, right? You got to realize limitations, though. In other words, when the light is harsh, you need to expose for one or the other, the bright or the dark. Again, I usually go after those highlights so I don't blow them out and lose all the information out of that part of the image. Here's a general rule of thumb right off the bat. If you or your subjects have to squint because the light is probably too harsh to shoot in, probably. Your subject's going to be sweating and kind of squinting, and they won't be able to get out of there fast enough. They'll hate you for putting them through that. You know, people's eyes will tear up. I really watch shooting in harsh light. Harsh light to me, again, is mainly when the sun is still way high in the sky. There are other harsh light sources, surely, but that's the main one. Wait until the sun's calmed down a little bit. Wait until it's closer to the horizon. Lovely pictures generally come from low intensity light, first thing in the morning or late in the afternoon or evening. Let's look at this. This is in fairly harsh light, believe it or not. The highlights are almost blown out. This is little baby Spencer here. We've about lost all the highlights in there. I don't know what the histogram looked like, but it's very close. The highlights have almost no detail. I like the perspective, the shallow depth of field and getting down low on the grass, but even the grass is kind of blown out, right? It isn't very green or lush. Now let's look. Look at this, a little later on, same lawn, but look at what happens in softer light. The grass is lush and green. The kid's eyes are open wider because he's not squinting. He's staring down and he's not worried about the sunlight. He's looking at me, I'm calling him. The frame's better because he's in a better mood. He's not out cooking in the middle of the day. It's just a better frame. It's a better time of day. Colors really come alive in softer light as well, I've found. The greens are rich in the second photo. That's the thing about saturation. In softer light, we can often get better results. You don't need harsh light to get vivid color, believe it or not. So when you can control the background and the light, take advantage of it. When you can't, maybe it's just a great time to watch, get a shot later. Think about things, anticipate things, do your homework a little bit. It's a very common mistake though, insisting on shooting something when the light is too harsh. On the other hand, sometimes you really want a picture at a bad time of the day. You don't have a choice. So let me show you what you can do. Remember that light box we use with Nimbus the Owl, that little soft box? I know you've probably always used flash for nighttime or indoor shots and you haven't thought about reflectors, but I hope you're getting the idea that it's great when you use flash outdoors too, if you do it well. Now, when we were out in Nebraska, I wanted to get a photo of Marcy from the Great Courses team, but we were in the harsh, intense light in the middle of the day. So let me show you how we got a really nice picture of her anyway, despite the middle of the day timing. Okay, so we've tried a couple of pictures out in the sun, no good. No good. Marcy's squinting, it's painful. Let's get into the shade and relax a little bit. Now Marcy's wide-eyed, relaxed, comfortable. Okay, great. Now, how do we deal with this? Marcy's in very deep shade here, and the whole world is lit brightly. What do? We're reverse lit, aren't we? We need the world to be toned down a little bit light-wise. We need Marcy to be a little bit brighter. We need to really craft this well. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, our camera needs to be underexposing the background. We are limited a bit in that the shutter will only go to 250th of a second with a flash. Why? Because if you try to go faster than 250th, like to 500 or 1,000th, you'll catch the shutter blades in the picture. That's just the mechanics of it, because the shutter is a mechanical thing and it can't compete with the quick burst of light from the flash. It's just how it is. All right, so 250th of a second, make a really small hole in your lens, f20, f22, and I have my ISO dialed down as low as it'll go on my camera, 200. And I know from looking through here, that'll slightly underexpose the background. That's where I want to be. Slightly down, slightly dark back there. I don't want the background to compete with my subject, Marcy. All right, so now we introduce Fill Flash. Our buddy Phil got our cheapy softbox on here to diffuse the light. We have our flash cranked up to where we about want it. The closer the flash is, the softer the light, and that looks great. I mean, that looks like a professional studio, believe it or not. And it's just a softbox over a flash, and it looks fantastic. Well, that's great. Mission accomplished, problem solved, and Marcy's not squinting. It's much more comfortable. We have more time. Look, I know you guys are going to have lots of events, family events, social gatherings, parades, whatever, where you're going to have loved ones that you want to get pictures of, and it's going to be in the middle of the day, the worst time of the day. Pull them off, get them into the shade, light them a little bit. With a technique like this, you cannot go wrong. Problem solved. So fill flash, that's a term you've heard me say, right? It's fill flash because it's filling in the shadows. It's brightening up your subject to set them off from the background that's slightly underexposed in this case. Basically, a lot of people are lucky if their fill flash just gets them to match the exposure of the overall scene. Now, it's a technique that you want to use over and over. Dial down the exposure on the background and then use that softbox to bring the subject out of the shadows to really illuminate them well. It's a very nice look. Love it. But it has to be done well. Now, remember, this is another little nugget of wisdom. Dark objects are easier to photograph in shaded light. It's true. Shaded or overcast light really, really works on dark objects. This applies to birds, people with dark skin, dogs, you name it. If you can get dark subjects in soft overcast light at the end of the day or on an overcast day when everything's subtle, it's really easy to bring out detail. Here's a couple of classic examples. A black bear feeding on salmon in a stream in Canada a few years ago. Look at how that's all blocked up. Totally blown out flesh on the fish. Black as can be, no detail there at all. Okay, same bear, same stream later in the afternoon. Look at this. Very soft and subtle. Now we're seeing detail in the fur. We can see detail in the water flying around. Everything's rich and nice. That's great. That's excellent. We're just waiting for a soft, subtle amount of light. That's what you have to have if you have a dark object. What else? What else? Well, we can look at strong colors as well. We can go for strong colors. Colors like this in strong light create this instant kind of richness and vibrancy to any situation. This picture of cranes, sandhill cranes in Nebraska, is a good example. Look at how bright yellow and bright orange help this go to work. Color is also really good when the scene's monochromatic, believe it or not. Monochromatic, yeah, fairly monochromatic. This is Spencer wearing a bright blue coat, red mittens. Color's holding this picture together more than anything else. The color in the picture really, really works. That's great. This is a shot of snow near my house in Lincoln just after the sun is set, but still it works. Why? Because the light's nice and even. We're not fighting the sun. We're not fighting the sun. That's a good thing to remember. So listen, even when the light isn't perfect, it can still be good. When you're shooting in less than ideal conditions, and trust me, you will, do what you can. Focus on the emotion and action and wait for the moment to happen. It's a powerful photo still, even if it's less than perfect. It's a picture of Kathy coming home from Antarctica. It's one of my favorite pictures. It's a total grab shot. Is it a great picture compositionally or light-wise? No. But this is when the kids met up with their mother again. She'd just gotten off the plane. Is the color good? Not necessarily. Is the background perfect? No, it's kind of sloppy. Pretty junky, actually. Are the people perfect? No. But the reason this photograph works for me is because it's a real moment. I wasn't really analyzing lots when I did it. This is the exact moment when the kids ran up to her after she was away from them for the first time, and she was gone a month to Antarctica with me. So this is the moment they ran up and hugged her, and it shows how much they love her and rely on her. She's their life raft. You know, at first it really bugged me that I couldn't see Spencer's face, but I really love it now. I like this picture more as time goes by. It's about the moment sometimes, you guys. It's not always about getting it perfect, the intensity of light, the color, or the background. It's just about the moment you want to get. I always have my camera with me. It's ready to go. It's on aperture priority. I knew in this case I wanted to be close, I want to be right there with a wide angle lens. I knew I'd need a fast shutter speed, so I cranked the ISO to about 2500 or so. Had a big hole in my lens, f2.8, no flash here. This is about getting close, being intimate, and shooting. I shot 10 frames or so, but this first one, when they first come in contact, that's the best. That's when the emotion's the best. It works. One of the few pictures of my own I have up in my house, out of all the hundreds of thousands I've shot. So your assignment, I want you to scope out, find, and shoot some great color right at home. It could be anything at all, from the glow of a reading light to the red of your car's taillights. Make sure that you photograph the subject in that color, not the source of the color itself. You understand me? Don't look towards the sunset and shoot those red clouds. Shoot the reflected light off those clouds the other direction at sunset. Shoot to the east, right? Shoot some red, some warmer scenes. Try getting some reflected color off a coat, off the water, for example, whatever. Experiment with your white balance settings. Try every one of the options and see what happens when the camera adjusts for various sorts of light. So experiment with light intensity. Find a spot you like and photograph it when the light is at its most intense. Then return when the light's softer. Experiment with shutter, aperture, ISO, all these things. Remember to crank up that ISO to let in more light sensitivity when you need it, late in the day, indoors. Try several different settings. Chimp the image on the back of your camera. Do all these things. We got one more issue to cover on the subject of light. What can we do with the found light, the ambient light, when it won't get us the picture we need? That's when we need artificial light. Flash can get the job done, so can other things. I've been referring to flash and artificial light sources a lot. In the next lecture, we're going to talk much more in depth about each. So come on back.